Joy of Joyquilts. Today we're focusing on the last row of an edge-to-edge quilt. What makes the last row a little bit different is you have to make sure that it hasn't gotten stretched or skewed throughout the quilting process. So take a ruler and measure at the dead bar, and then you check that measurement all the way across the quilt. If it's off, then this is the time that you're going to adjust it. Make sure that you get it in the right spot. That's your main consideration, is to make sure that your quilt is straight and flat across, because you don't want to have to adjust in the trimming, because then that makes the quilt kind of go off center. Okay, so I'm just going to pull up the bobbin thread and we'll get this started. The other thing I do at the last row is I'll take a point in the previous row to set my design, and then when it asks me where I want to start, I say the closest position, at which point I have moved the sewing head down to the lowest point that it's going to hit on the quilt. That way I know for sure where it's going to end. You can see it on screen, but I like to do it visually and physically with the sew head. This stuff is hard to whip out. Once it goes in, you really want to leave it there. The bottom row, you always want to be really close and make sure that it stays where you put it, because sometimes the needle will have a little drag and it'll pull the fabric. And nobody likes puckers, especially in the last row. You can really see them. Of course, this is the easy row to make sure your batting is flat, because you can see it. And of course your backing. So that's about where I want to end up. 3/4 of an inch in, that's where I started from the top. And if you remember, I did allow 2 inches, and that kind of compensates for the shrinkage as you quilt. If by the last row, or the second to last row, I found that I was off a little bit, I would disconnect the design and check that row, load those 2 rows and check what the measurement is, and then physically check with the ruler what the area, the quilting design area you have left is. And if it's not exactly right, you can add a 1/4 inch or take away a 1/4 inch at this point. It really isn't going to show. If you do it in the last row, then it's a little trickier. It does become a little more obvious. A pattern like this, you would probably never see it because it's a very busy pattern. But we like to make sure that it's perfect, and then we don't have to do that. So now I'm going to come along and bury those threads. You leave an extra long thread, pull the bobbin thread up in the beginning, at the end, or any time when we run out of thread or the thread breaks. And that way we can bury the threads between the layers. And now I'm pretty sure that's not going to come out. I tied a little knot, if you noticed, at the end, right at the point where it touches the fabric. And when you pop that knot in, it just gives a little extra security, so that in washing and whatever, your threads aren't going to travel back out to the outside of the quilt. I'm going to speed this up a little bit because I'm going to be standing right here for the process. In the middle rows, you can generally go faster as well, because you don't have to worry about edges. If there's any kind of bulk, this is usually where you're going to find it. This quilt doesn't have any, but sometimes you'll have a bit of a wobble or a wave at the bottom where somebody's stretched it, particularly when there's a border. When there's no border, you're pretty much safe, because they haven't stretched it to fit anything. It's basically just all the blocks sewn together. I have to say, edge to edge is the most simple way of quilting by machine. When you have borders, that's extra rows to make sure that you have straight and you're fitting different designs into them. With the edge to edge, you just have to make sure you're balanced east, west, north, south. And with all the quilts being the same, there's not a different construction method involved, so they tend to not have to be eased. They usually just fit perfectly, which this one does. So this is just going to continue to the end of the row, and then I'm going to bury the threads at the other end, and this quilt will be done. The last row is the trickiest because it, as we say, it has had the chance to wobble and wave along the way, and if anything is going to be out of shape, it's going to be on this row. So it's very important to make sure about 3 or 4 rows back that things are coming into shape, and especially those last 2 rows. Joyquilts, Facebook, Instagram, joyquilts.com, hotmail.com, Yelp Edmonton. That's it for this one.